Hello everyone and welcome back to the third game of the finals of the Opera Euro Rapid. We are in the second day, and as the first day ended in a draw, now we have to see who will be victorious on the second day to claim it all. So this is game 3. Like we said, game 1 ended by Wesley winning a most impressive game. Then game 2 ended in a draw, and now comes game 3. And game 3 is well, it's a spectacular struggle. So I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. Let's dive straight into it. So Wesley again with the white pieces again goes for e4. We have e5 by Magnus, knight f3, knight to c6, that's not a knight, and the bishop to c4. We have bishop to c5 by Magnus, and now now castles. Just going into the normal main line of the Giuoco Piano. We have knight to f6 and now d3, defending the e4 pawn, and the d6 now. We have c3, making some room for the bishop, also preparing to push the pawn in the center. And now, as you might also play something like a4, b4, black stops that, just a5, taking care of that b4 idea. Rook to e1, and now just castles. We often mention that here knight g4 going after the f2 pawn isn't really anything for black, because after rook e2 just h3 pushes away the knight. I know I always mention this, but it can be useful for new players to not be afraid of ghosts. So here we have castles by Magnus and knight b to d2, just continuing development. Bishop back to a7, so the bishop doesn't come under attack. At some point white will decide to push d4. And now knight to f1, shifting the knight to g3 or e3 depending on what black plays. We have bishop to e6. Developing the dark square bishop, and now bishop to b5. Here you could capture, but that may be just playing into black's hands. He gets the semi-open file for the rook and the very nice center. He can push d5 at will. So nothing very impressive going on here. So instead, bishop to b5, and now knight to e7. And we actually reach a position Magnus Carlsen already had with the black pieces this year in the Tata Steel in January. He had it against Young Krzysztof Duda, and that game ended in a draw. In that game, knight to g3 was played by Duda, but here Wesley plays d4, and it is as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus deals with this new idea. He starts by pushing back the bishop. We have c6, and now bishop back to d3, and knight to g6 as planned. These knights can now come to h5, they can come to f4. It's not going to be very pleasant for white facing all of these knights. So h3, making some breathing room for the king. Also ideas like knight to h2 might be possible in the future, but just taking away the g4 square from black's pieces. And now knight to h5. So one of the knights is coming to f4, and it's very unlikely that white will be interested in giving up one of the bishops for that knight. So here bishop to e3 and just knight h to f4. So that knight is now, it's not a monster knight as of yet, but it is a very strong knight. So bishop back to c2, not allowing this knight to be traded for bishop, and now queen to c8. And with this queen to c8 move, Magnus announces that he has some very nasty plans for Wesley's king side. Some bishop captures on h3 as an idea, knight captures on h3 as an idea, and so on. So here we have bishop to b3 by Wesley. The absolutely most solid is just captures on f4, knight captures on knight e3, just defending against any bishop captures on h3 ideas, because here if you go for such a maneuver, captures, and captures, the good thing is that the knight is covering the g2 square, so there aren't any imminent mating threats available. And after knight to h2, white can just bring the queen to g4, and that's just it. Black's attack is not even happening. But Wesley said, I'm not afraid of any attacks here, and he went bishop to b3, now trying to exchange this bishop for this bishop, and now Magnus needs to decide what to do here. So here you definitely have to go for bishop captures on h3. That's the whole point of this setup, but it's not all that easy to spot, because after bishop captures on h3, g captures, we need to play this a4 move, and that's I mean, who thinks of such a move, because we want to get the bishop away from this diagonal. White of course will prevent this by playing bishop to c4, then you strike in the center with the d5, and then after captures and captures, you will also capture on d5, because now you do not want to allow after black starts grabbing here on h3 that you do not have access to this diagonal. So here white will in fact play bishop captures on d5, giving back the piece. It is the absolute best move. Knight captures on d5, and now knight captures on e5. Knight captures on e5, d captures, and now knight captures on e3. Knight captures and queen captures. So just a massive capture fest here, and we would get this position where black is definitely better. He has a monster bishop here, beautifully placed queen, and the rook can definitely help out by coming into the game. So white would have some difficulties defending this. So instead, after this bishop to b3 move, Magnus just played captures on d4, and this is not the absolute best way, but okay, it's fine. I mean, you don't calculate all of this in a rapid game. So knight captures on d4, and now Magnus goes for bishop captures on d4. Again, bishop captures on b3 is also a possibility here. For example, bishop captures, and now if queen captures, this a4 move again happening out of nowhere, but we just want to get the queen away from the king side as much as possible. And also if you capture on a4, then you kind of go in front of the rook here. But okay, it is possible. For example, if queen captures, then we can finally start sacrificing some pieces. Knight captures, and now capturing an h3 is impossible. You have to play king h2 or king h1, because if you capture the knight, then just bishop captures on d4, queen captures on d4, or bishop captures, doesn't really matter. And now this knight to h4, and this knight to h4 is a crucial line in all of the a crucial move in all of the lines that involve Magnus actually sacrificing material, because now we have this problem of queen captures followed by checkmate, and white is unable to react to this because just knight to f3 check picks up the queen. And if you try something like king to g2, that's impossible because the knight is covering that square, and king h3 also impossible, still runs into the same check, winning the queen. So really crazy stuff here. So after this knight captures on d4, we have bishop captures on d4 by Magnus, and now c captures on d4 is the only good move for Wesley here. However, Wesley played queen captures on d4. And now what did we say, since we know it from the previous line that we've just seen? What is the queen doing here on the d4 square? Well, waiting to be forked in future variations. So here, feel free to pause the video and win this game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you that were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this just amazing line. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight captures on g2 now, not on h3. This is very important because now it doesn't matter what you play. If king captures on g2, then you have this bishop captures on h3 first, attacking the king. King to h2 or g1 for that matter, it's all the same. If you go to h1, then the queen is coming to g4, and again it's very scary with the threats of checkmate and queen to f3. So king h2, and now we have this perfect setup with the king on h2 or g1 and the queen on d4, and now comes again knight to h4. So okay, we know it from the previous line, but now, of course, you know the idea. The knight is coming here, and there is no defense against checkmating threats. And now if queen captures on d6, trying to retreat, for example, with something like this, we just go knight to f3 check, king to h1, and bishop captures on f1. And that's just it. The bishop cannot be captured because of queen to h3 checkmate. And if you don't capture it, then black will just continue happily grabbing pieces, and it's a winning game. That's what happens. What's happening after knight captures on g2. You could try an in-between move, a nice Zwischenzug, before actually accepting the sacrifice with bishop captures on e6, trying to remove black's very strong attacker, but then f captures on e6, and then the rook comes alive. So here we might see queen captures on d6, just trying to remaneuver the queen back to help out with the defense, but then knight captures on e1. So it doesn't really help all that much. For example, captures and now e5. Again, you have access to all of these beautiful squares. The knight can come to h4, and it's going to be impossible for white to defend this. However, that's a lot of possibilities and a lot to calculate. So Magnus, in fact, did not play this. And after queen captures on d4, Magnus actually went for bishop captures on b3. We have a captures on b3, and now again, the only way to continue to play for something more than a draw is to sacrifice here and then to go knight to h4, trying to go for the same line, so white will not be able to capture the knight. So at least you capture a pawn with check, and you will have a very nice position. If your knight is attacked, then you bring it back, but at least you've cracked open the white king's defenses. So instead, after a captures on b3, Magnus goes for d5, but now the moment has passed. Queen to d2, now threatening to win some material here, and only now Magnus captures on h3. But now it's a little bit different. We have g captures on h3, queen captures, and now f4, with the white queen very much ready to help out with the defense of the king. So knight to h4, now threatening this check to win the queen, and now knight to h2. And yes, you could say, okay, but there's this very nice queen captures here, and after queen captures, knight f3 check, yes, but white black is still down material. So after king g2 captures, we end this variation with white being up a piece. So after this knight to h2 move, we have d captures on e4, and now queen to f2. Now preparing to just defend, and there's not all that much black can do to continue this attack. So rook f to e8, of course going for some rook lifts and delivering checks, and now comes queen to f1, offering a queen trade. Wesley cannot allow Magnus to do this rook lift. Queen g3 check, and now comes king to h1, and now knight to f5. h5 was also a possibility here, but you simply don't have the time, and you don't have time for rook to e6 because queen to g1 is coming. So here we have knight to f5, and now comes queen to g2, offering a queen trade, and Magnus must accept this. So captures with check. You have to accept this because if you move the queen, queen g5, and again your queen and knight are under attack, now you're going to have to trade here. So instead, after queen g2, we have captures on g2 with check, king captures, and knight captures on e3. With check, rook captures, and now f5. And now Wesley is up a piece, but Wesley is up 3 pawns. So Magnus is up 3 pawns. So maybe if he can start those pawns rolling on the king's side, maybe good things can happen. So here, knight to f1, remaneuvering the knight. We have rook e to d8 now, and now rook a to e1. Rook e to e1, just getting the rook to the back rank, and now preparing to counter Carlsen's rooks on the d file. We have king to f7, and now rook e to d1. King to f6, Magnus improving the position of the king as much as possible, and now rook captures. We have rook captures and rook captures on a5. So Wesley grabs a pawn here, and Magnus starts playing on the king side with g5. Wesley, of course, captures that. We have captures, and now king to f2. And now comes h5. So now Magnus has 3 passed pawns here, 2 of them being connected, and Wesley has to be very careful. So he goes knight to e3. Sorry, that's a G. He goes knight to e3 first, and now b5, cutting off the rook from the defense from the 5th rank, so now he can start pushing his f-pawn. So knight to f1, and now h4. And here rook to a7, so he can start some sort of a defense from behind the king side pawns. And here the situation on the clock is Wesley is down to 2 minutes, and Magnus has some 3 minutes on the clock. So rook to h8, preparing to push that passed pawn, and now rook to f7. Rook to f7 with the idea of trying to bait in this f4 move. And the idea is now he wants to go rook to e7, attack this pawn, and after e3 check, create a blockade with king to f3. And now if you start pushing the pawn, even knight to h2, and now all of the king side pawns are nicely blockaded, and white will continue harassing the king and going after the queen side pawn. So here Magnus tries something different. Magnus starts h3 right away, and now knight to g3, going after this pawn, and now if you move it, just knight captures here with check. So Magnus continues pushing. We have h2, and now rook captures on f5. We have king to g4, now threatening h1 check, knight captures, and king captures rook, so Wesley has to move the rook. We have rook to f6, and now h1 with queen. We have knight captures on h1, rook captures on h1, and now rook captures on c6. So now a simple king and rook endgame, king to f4, and now rook to f6 with check. King e5, we have rook to f8, and now rook to h2 with check. King to e3, and now rook captures on b2. So now the material is equal, we have b4, and now rook back to h2. We have rook to e8 with check, king to d5, and now just rook to d8 with check. If you're wondering why Wesley doesn't grab this pawn, well, it's because he doesn't want to blunder the game away. Here you would just deliver check, the king has to move away from the defense of the rook, king f4, and now the king can just capture the rook after this check is given, of course. Check, king moves, and just rook captures. So not possible. So Wesley just continues checking Carlsen's king, rook to d8 check, king e5, rook to e8 check, and it was in this position that the players agreed to a draw after this amazing fight, where, I mean, it looks very simple to you guys when you see it like this, but there are so many complications here and so many variations. I just show you the most obvious ones that are completely forced, but you know, they see so many more moves, so many possibilities, and you don't have time to calculate all of them, so it's very easy to miss such a clean attack. And one of the reasons, of course, that made Magnus miss this whole idea of maybe sacrificing here on g2 is that he also sacrificed yesterday, and then Wesley sacrificed in the first game, and Wesley completely obliterated him. It didn't even mean anything that Magnus was able to grab 2 pawns after sacrificing a piece, so I guess that's why Magnus was reluctant to give up material this game, but this game he had to do it. So yeah, very impressive stuff, very nice game, excellent defense by Wesley, and in the end it ends in a draw. So now it all comes down to the last game, the 4th game, where Magnus will have the black pieces. If he cannot win a game, then Wesley is the winner of the Opera Euro Rapid Tournament. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Mr. Hoodie Guy, Ravi Perry, Marcus Van Atten, Philip Tuckman, and Michel Del Monte for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Opera Euro Rapid with the 4th game, maybe the final one, but maybe not. Maybe we go into rapid tiebreak, into blitz tiebreaks. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.